Sounds good.
Mm, yeah, so let's start with your name, where you are now, and yeah, maybe also your age.
Sure. My name is Aliya. I'm in Toronto. This is my apartment around me. This is the living room. You can't see very much, but there is a big bookshelf over here and another bookshelf behind me. So there's a lot of books.
Uh-huh.
I've spent a lot of time in this room, not only in the last few months of isolation, but I also I wrote my dissertation here. So I have a very close relationship to this room in terms of the work that I've done. And so that's where I'm seated right now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, by the way, so congratulations, because it's quite a fresh thing to somehow to have this dissertation to defend it. No?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So, thank you.
Yeah, really, sincere congratulations. And you mentioned bookshelves, but there are pretty many things here that I can see that are visible to me.
There are a lot of things. Yeah,
Beautiful paintings. I don't
when
know, drawings.
when COVID started, I got into drawing. Like I probably hadn't drawn since I was 18 years old, and then partly I was like, okay, I need to pass the time. I'm just going to be stuck at home. And then another part was kind of this excitement about rediscovering something and having time to actually do it. So you can't really see much of this wall. I can try to move it a bit, but there's quite a few drawings that I've done, like just with pastel and some of it is very much like elementary school level, and then others I kind of got better and I looked up some techniques and strategies. So it ended up being a really cool exercise, kind of like art therapy, so yeah.
Yeah, and you said Toronto, your apartment, and this dissertation, if you could say something more, and also your relation to Gestalt, just briefly, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So my background, like you, is in sociology. I defended my dissertation, let's see, 2 years ago. So that would be the summer of 2018. And my research was on, I guess you could say, social justice movements. Specifically, I looked at anti-racist feminism. And I was interested in looking at the political emotions of anti-racist feminism. So, for example, anger, bitterness, resentment, rage, outrage, and I felt like there's kind of this psychological or emotional underlayer to politics, right? And in other ways, they're just interwoven. And we don't often talk about that, right? So I was interested in looking at that, and from that came out, I guess, work around racial trauma. So it's like, we see today with BLM, Black Lives Matter, and in other, many other movements, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of rage, but there's also pain, right? Like the anger and the rage are rooted in something. It is pain. And so I was interested, and I still am interested in discovering, what is that racial pain? What does it look like? Where does it come from? How can we work with it? What is racial trauma? So that has led me into a study that I'm doing right now with a colleague and dear friend from Gestalt as well. Her name is Fiona. And so the two of us are interviewing racialized therapists in Canada as well as racialized clients, to talk to them about their experiences in therapy around race and around racial trauma. So that's kind of my academic background and how I'm using it now. And Gestalt, how did I get into Gestalt? I
will ask you how did you yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, just to cut into, but I'm trying to keep the order a bit, at the same time trying to follow you, of course, but if you could say now only briefly, are you a therapist already? I guess you're still a trainee, yes? And where? And
sure, yeah.
We will come back to it for sure.
Of course, yes. So I'm a trainee, and I'm in my 4th year of training. So, and there's 5 years total. And the 4th year is, I guess, where the clinical component begins. So I will start seeing clients in November of this year. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
And I mean, in Toronto, there is one training school, or?
Yeah, exactly. The Gestalt Institute of Toronto.
And have you been to this conference that was held 2 years ago?
No, I didn't go. I was just finishing. Was it in 2018? Is that one?
2018. No, 18. No, 18. Yes, 18. Yes.
So I think I had just finished my dissertation, and I was kind of in a state where going to another conference was just not my priority at that moment. But I feel like I missed a lot, like I've spoken to a lot of people who attended, and I wish I could have been there. And I was planning to go to Ireland this year, which didn't happen. So that's too bad.
I'm referring to that because, together with John, we went to that conference, and we were both the same, intimidated how it is going to be, and so on. And we stayed actually together at some of Gestalt trainees in Toronto, because there at the conference apparently there were many students, and it was so kind of now talking to you and spending some time there, and the conference was really an important moment for me, and that's why I'm also asking about that, whether we met and or not.
Unfortunately not. I mean, I really regret not going. I just wasn't in the place to.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. And this was so intense, the conference itself, because I mean, all conferences are, but this one was really long. We started with these pre-conference workshops. So every day when we, every day when we woke up, we were more tired. And we kept going, and I remember those kind of walking to the underground, and okay, one more a day. Okay, we were really supporting one another in that. It was a big, conference, a big event for us both. Yeah.
Well, it seems to be the Gestalt style to kind of have very intense experiences one after the other. So I can imagine.
Yeah. And if you could now say more about, how would you describe yourself as a person? Your qualities, your values, your passions?
It's a good question. I mean, I think more than anything, I really see myself as always in process. Like I really see myself as changing and adapting adapting and growing and evolving and sometimes, you know, devolving and then finding a way again. So I guess with that being said, some things that have remained I guess more persistent have been I guess a real emphasis on social justice, like really kind of a lot of my work, a lot of my interests are around topics of social justice, whether, you know, my dissertation or research that I've done since then, or just kind of my everyday being in life, just around, you know, how do we live with one another in this moment? You know, how do we live with one another, and is it working? Like, you know, and or who is it working for, and who is it not working for? You know, what does it mean for me to live, you know, in this apartment, in this body, in this moment? You know, what does it mean for my neighbor? What does it mean for people on, you know, that we're seeing who are subject to brutal forms of police violence, you know, people who are suffering from poverty. So how are we all in this together? What does it mean to be with one another in the society? What does it mean to live? And so for me, this, I guess, social justice and social equality and oppression and fairness have really sort of oriented my life for some time now.
Yeah. Before you continue, yeah, it might sound so well, naive. I don't know. Is it a good word? But coming back to this conference and to my first visit in Canada and in Toronto, I don't know. Maybe it was this field of Gestalt therapy, Gestalt conference that I felt so. With people, so open and in the streets, and I mean, I traveled and always have been traveling a lot in my life, but I've been really feeling, very much, somehow welcomed at the conference, but somehow. Yeah, I would somehow also connect it to your culture, so to speak, somehow. And it doesn't, of course, mean that, what you are now describing is it's not taking place, but it is, I don't know how to put it. But even there, where you are, of course, oppression is an everyday experience.
Yeah, and I mean, what you say is so interesting, because it brings my attention to how these things are different for different people, right? And it's also different on different layers. So you can, I think it's completely possible to visit Toronto as a city and to feel it to be open and diverse. You know, and it's also possible to visit and to find it to be hostile and unsafe. And it's also possible to come at first and to think, oh, I can live here, I can find space in here. But then as you live, to kind of be more aware of some of the underlayers, you know, some of the more silent ways in which you might feel unsafe or uncomfortable or feel like you don't belong. So I think what you're saying is really interesting in terms of like our relationships to spaces and how they change, you know, and how they're different according to how you show up.
But anyway, you mentioned that those those concerns are your, as I said, everyday experience in sense of thinking. I imagine, but also acting? How, if I may ask, does your typical week look like?
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think the acting part is difficult,
mm,
and I find that a lot of the work that I did in grad school was around understanding,
mhm,
understanding and writing and teaching and learning. But then it was sort of this moment of, okay, so do I join, this organization and become an activist, or do I become an organizer, or like, how do I work? What can I actually do? Um, and I don't know the answer to that. Like I have been, I've somewhat been in the activist side, and I've somewhat been in the academic research writing side, and then now I'm a therapy student.
mhm,
So it's constantly shifting in terms of like, what can I actually do? How can I show up? How can I move from thinking or kind of politics to actually action?
mhm,
Um, so I guess I don't always know the answer to that.
mhm.
In my own life, I think, did you ask me what a week is like, what an average week is like, or something like
Well, I am already satisfied with the answer
that?
you
Okay.
are giving. No, really.
Oh,
This already, yeah, yeah. I understand, and but does that mean also, in terms of activism, that there are some that there are movements that you simply don't want to belong to, or that you are looking for some space for yourself there? Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, I'm not I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Yeah.
I guess for me,
Which is
uh,
already an answer. Sorry, because. Mhm,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say that I'm still looking for something.
mhm, mhm,
I think I'm still very much looking for something. Um, and maybe I should be more clear in saying I'm looking for something in one place, because I
mhm,
have
uh-huh,
I have many people to talk to about issues of anti-oppression,
uh-huh,
and I have even people within Gestalt who I can speak to
uh-huh,
about certain things. And I have my research and my writing, which is in the field of anti-oppression. So I'm doing things, um, but I don't feel necessarily the sense of a community, the sense of, this is something that we are doing, and this is our vision. We're working towards this goal. We're working towards this type of transformation that we want to see in the society, right? Because I feel like for me, it can be very easy to get into like little pockets of like, okay, so we want to, improve this,
uh-huh.
like this small thing,
Yeah.
right? Or we want to kind of focus on this small thing. But then what happens to the bigger picture? And sometimes how do these small interventions end up perhaps making things easier in the bigger picture, but they don't change the bigger picture? So I'm always looking for more radical and more socially transformative um, goals and people with whom to actually co-create and move towards these goals,
Mhm,
if that makes sense.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Very much. I guess I will again come back to it later on, when I ask you also a bit about Gestalt. But I am now also interested in who has influenced you this way. I mean, the way you are now, the way you are describing yourself to me. Who, or maybe what circumstances, what specific the situations which.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I'll try to answer it, because I'm not. It's hard, right? Especially when it comes to the childhood stuff, because it was so long ago, and it's hard to know like which influences actually land where. But I would say, um, I would say my parents played a part. I was reflecting recently on how if they felt like something unfair happened, they would say something about it. You know, they would say something about it. They would say, you know, sometimes that happened within the family, within the house, and sometimes that happened outside of the house. But they had awareness, right? They had awareness and they had intuition, and they also had dignity, right? Like it takes a certain type of dignity or support in order to say that person was racist or that was wrong, you know? And I think I learned the possibility of if something happens that is unjust, you can say something about it, you know? And so like, and I mean, I don't want to like misrepresent myself. When I was a teenager, it was embarrassing, right? When I was a teenager, I was like, no, everything's okay, don't say those things, right? Like, because so much for me of being part of a teenager was wanting to belong. Like, here I am, I'm different, I don't fit in, so I need to belong in order to be part of the society. So if one of my parents or someone around me said, no, this is racist, or no, this is wrong, that was hugely embarrassing. But now I have so much gratitude for my parents to have taught their children to stand up for themselves, you know, to stand up against something that is wrong, something that is dehumanizing you. You know, that's okay, you can do that. So I think my parents were part of it. And I think a lot of what really helped me was my education, you know, specifically a sociological, feminist, anti-racist education, because I think, you know, I was influenced by my parents. I had a quite distinct feeling that things weren't equal, like things weren't fair, you know, as I was growing up. I'm like, you know, some of these things, they don't fit. They don't make sense to me. There's something that's going on. And it wasn't just around race or, you know, things that, like, for example, class. I came from a middle class background, but I saw poverty and I saw people on the streets and I saw homeless people. And I was like, something isn't right here. Like it's not fitting, you know, like a lot of things weren't fitting. A lot of things in terms of how men were, you know, in relation to women. And I didn't quite have the language. And then once I went to university and I took these courses and I had, I was really blessed in terms of some of the scholars that I met and that taught me. I had language, you know, and with language came energy, and with energy came this ability to validate, like, oh, I feel this way because it's happening. It's not in my head. I'm not too sensitive. I'm not too political. I'm not trying to be politically correct. These are real things. The feedback that my body is giving me in this moment that I'm not safe or I'm being disrespected. These are real things. So I think within that, there were a lot of people who modeled and who were influential to me, you know, throughout. I mean, I was in university for so long, right? Like throughout my undergraduate degree and my master's and then the PhD, like all of that time really cemented, you know, this training and this understanding, this consciousness around the world, being able to see inequality and really understand how our society is structured by systemic oppression and systemic inequality. It's not my opinion, you know, it's real, right? So I feel all of that really had a huge influence on me.
And yeah, and I guess now it's a good moment to ask you about this Gestalt thing. How did you come to it, given what you have already said? Yeah, did you need it somehow to complete your understanding, experience? I wonder, how would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I did need it. It's interesting that you phrased it that way. I needed something. Like I know I needed something, and I guess like you know, a lot of these experiences that I've been speaking about, like going to university, doing a PhD, like they weren't easy, right? Like there's kind of this thing that happens where you finish a program, you have a PhD, and people congratulate you, but you're like, no, it was hard. You know, I don't know if you can relate to this, but the suffering and the struggle, you know, kind of gets invisibilized, and suddenly you become something. But for me, the PhD was very difficult. I felt it to be a very unsupported experience. I felt there to be a lot of performance. You know, a lot of people who, for me now, when I think back, were probably quite ungrounded and very much had to perform a certain type of graduate student. You know, it was very competitive. For me, the curiosity was missing. The curiosity in the process and how to be with something and really think about something. It was more like, this is what I know. What do you know? You know, and that wasn't a supportive working environment for me. Like that's not how I work, right? So I needed help. I needed support, and I knew that. And I had a friend who was seeing a therapist at the time, and she said, you know, she's a good feminist therapist. You'll like her. And I'm like, okay, great, sign me up. Like that's all it took. And I had never heard of Gestalt before. But she ended up being not only a feminist therapist, but one that was trained in Gestalt. So very quickly, I mean, the way that Gestalt works, or the way that I experience it, is that it's quite quick, right? You know, you're sitting in front of someone, and you're already in process with them. You know, you're already in it. You know, you're already kind of in contact, and I felt that to be very different from anything I had experienced in my life. The immediacy, the urgency, the really being with, the directness, the honesty, it kind of got rid of a lot of layers that I was used to and that weren't serving me. So that's how I got introduced to Gestalt.
Yeah, I was wondering, because when you mentioned your gratitude to your colleagues at the university, and apparently great scholars, as you said, I was wondering how this contact with them looked like. I mean, also in terms of I don't know, in terms of contact, in terms of quality of contact, to use this Gestalt term, I mean, of contact, and with this academic environment and so on. And so I can obviously relate to that. And I guess I may say that I envy you somehow, that you felt that you need to be supported, because I was so I had enough, so much I was so frustrated, so felt, I don't know whether it was there was something wrong with me or whatever, that I felt, okay, this is my PhD, thank you, and goodbye. I wanted to do this, you know, and go only to this Gestalt training, and bye-bye. I don't belong here, and so on. And I remember then my supervisor and said, okay, go there, learn, take what you want, but come back because you like it. but at that moment I didn't feel it. I was so much in pain, so much in pain. But I guess you can relate to that too. But but what I'm trying to say is that well, it's so lovely to hear that after your PhD you started to do, you know, your research, being active somehow again. And I feel that, I mean, I did, there was no pause, there was no break for me at the university, but there was some emotional break in me for more than 1 year, for more, maybe 2 years, maybe even 3. I don't know. I stopped counting, and now coming back to sociology. I mean, for the last 2 years or so. So just to yeah, somehow in terms of resonating, as I somehow warned you, I will be putting myself, but yes, these are different worlds, no? This academic world, which it is, we can explain why it is so, but it is oppressive structure in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a good way of putting it, right? Like, for me, the academic world, it was oppressive. You know, it was painful. There was a lot of struggle. It was constantly, it was a lot of fighting. You know, it was a lot of sort of, how do I remain here? You know, how can I, you know, you have to read so much and you have to perform so much, and you're constantly having to never show any vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And that's really a lot for a human being to take on for so many years, to just always show up as an authority, or, you know, someone who knows things, as opposed to someone who is struggling and just human, right? Just really kind of trying to figure things out. And in my experience, there wasn't any space for that. That's everything, you know, as you said, that's the pain on the inside, right? So you feel the break on the inside, but on the outside, you're still going to conferences and presenting papers and publishing and meeting your supervisor and teaching classes. Like, you're still doing that. So I think perhaps what happened for me was that I couldn't live like that anymore. Like, the support was just very much missing, and it became a choice. And at one point I was like, okay, so I can drop out of the PhD, right? People do that. I'm my very close friends, I had a few who did that. I respect that decision. Or I remain in academia and I make it my own. You know? So like, academia isn't my life. It is part of my life. It belongs in my life. And within that, I still take care of myself. And, you know, I still get to remain, like I still remain agency. I can have choices. I'm not just dragged by this big monster, right? And so that's something I had to do. And part of that process for me was seeing a Gestalt therapist, you know, and you know, getting that support. And a lot of the support was around, like, what am I feeling? What do I need right now? You know, what do I feel? If I'm feeling anxiety, that means I don't have enough support. So how can I support myself? And also, how can I appeal to the environment in terms of providing me with support? So the way that I understood academia was that everything was very rigid. You do this, and you don't do this. But even within that, to kind of have a bit of space and to say, well, can I do it in this way? You know, like, can I try doing it in this other way? Like, for me, I would never have even thought of that, because the rigidity of the system is such that this is just how you do it. So I think Gestalt also helped me in trying to figure out, I don't only have to change myself to be comfortable, but I can also, you know, work with the environment in certain ways that maybe I can feel more supported.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, forgot what I wanted to ask you because I was so much into. Just give me a moment. Yes, relating to that, being in academia, and maybe this relates also to the outside of academia. What matters to you more? I mean, what shaped you more, being a woman in the world, being a woman in the academia, or I don't know, being I don't know, middle or some other factors, or because you mentioned anti-racist feminism, yes, is that so? I wonder which of the two matter more.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to separate them because I exist, of course, simultaneously as both brown and a woman, and other things, and middle class, and whatever else. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think they all acted on me. All of these forces sort of acted on me, as well as moving to a new city, to do graduate school. So I think there were a lot of influences. There were a lot of things that impacted my experience of academia, and the degree to which I felt like I belonged. I felt like, oh, this is a space for me. This is somewhere I can feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of it, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like this was for me. This was a space for me. A lot of people around me had, parents were scholars, right? And, they had sort of been in the system, like they knew these things. And that was not my experience. So I felt like, I guess there's two things that impacted me. One was sort of self-survival. So here I am. I'm in an environment that doesn't feel friendly, and I feel like I don't belong here. So what am I going to do, right? What am I going to do if I'm going to stay? What am I going to do to survive this experience? So there was a lot of work. Therapy was one thing, but also kind of finding colleagues and classmates who looked like me, who had similar experiences, with whom we could share things, with whom, we can kind of feel less crazy, right? Like, oh yeah, this is how it is. It's not just me. So there was a lot of work around, finding like-minded people who I'm still very close with and who absolutely helped me survive that experience. And then the other part was kind of just, like I said earlier, making a decision for myself around, this is going to be my PhD. This is going to be my experience. This is something that I want to do, and I'm going to do it in my own way. And finding people, supervisors, committee members, whoever else who would support that. And I feel very lucky that eventually I was able to find that. Mm-hmm. I was able to find people who were interested in my project and who were interested in supporting it. And only then could I do good work, because you need that support, you need that safety, you need to be held in whatever you're doing to be able to do it. And I feel really grateful that eventually I got there. But it was only after I did a lot of work to kind of find, where can I find supports in this extremely unsupportive and oppressive environment? Mm-hmm. And in my experience, a lot of people don't find those supports. And so, they have a breakdown, mm-hmm. or they leave, or both. Mm-hmm. And I've really witnessed a lot of suffering from my colleagues, a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks, a lot of, really serious issues that stem completely in just the lack of support for certain types of people in these spaces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes it's even hidden, I mean, from this public knowledge that, oh, depression, he's suffering from depression. Huh? This is, you know, again, this sign of vulnerability, which is called weakness.
Sure, exactly.
Circles. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm always thinking about like who is conspiring, like, you know, who is conspiring with whom
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
to make our experiences secret or shameful, right? Like what is actually happening in the university community and you know, in work, you know, places, that if I feel anxious or if I feel depressed, it is my problem, it is my issue, it is my secret, it is my weakness. Like, how can we actually be with one another, you know, in society where we can share these things? Because I mean, this might be a whole other tangent, but like, you know, as a sociologist, I don't see mental health as separated from society at all, right? Like, we live in a very messed up, problematic society, and we are human, we're sensitive human beings. Of course, that's going to affect us. But why, you know, what is operating that makes me feel that my anxiety is my failing? You know?
Yeah.
So there's so much there.
And should be hospitalized and yeah, and closed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, when I look forward to, you know, practicing and seeing clients, it's really going to be an emphasis of mine to be able to make those connections between, you know, you feel anxious in front of me, but let's look at the world and let's look at your experiences and let's look at all of these things and how they're related, because it's not just you, right?
Yeah, that was actually my next question around your practice, because you will soon start, and yes, and will it be a sociological psychotherapy, so to speak? I don't know. I mean, you've already mentioned that you want to do it, yeah, again, yourself, your way. But still you want to see clients. It's not that you are radical here and you think, okay, no therapy, some other forms, but not in the office. You will be seeing individuals also.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, these are really good questions as I think about how I want my practice to look. And I'm sure it's going to be something that changes, you know, and evolves. But the way that I see it now is yes, I would like to bring some type of, you know, sociopolitical understanding to inform how I am with the client. Because the thing is, whether or not I bring it up in the office, it's already here. It's already here, right? Like, no client just shows up as a client that is divorced from their race and their gender and their class, and, you know, like, that's impossible. So, and that doesn't mean it's always helpful to say, okay, let's talk about these things now. I'm not saying that either. But I think just to be able to move between the social and the individual and interpersonal, and to kind of, you know, have that, you know, on my mind at all times, that we're always operating on these different levels, right?
And during your training so far, what have been most challenging? I mean, in terms of theory, or maybe in terms of practice. I wonder for you, what has been the most challenging?
I mean, perhaps you can already guess, given that you have a similar background to me, but really, like, I mean, the lack of the social, right? Like there's, you know, my sociology brain is always like, what? No. Like, what about history? Like, what about politics? What about this? What about that? What about sexism? Like, can we really talk about gender without talking about sexism? To me, that is like, that makes my head spin. Like, I can't do it, right? So, so my main challenge is in Gestalt training, if we are talking and thinking about the present moment, right? The present moment, what arises between you and I, our awareness of our bodies, our awareness of one another, you know, what comes up in this moment, you know, the I-thou relationship. For me, there's so much that's missing, right? There's so much that's missing. So there's so much of the social world that I feel isn't, I don't know, there's, whether there's no space for it or it's being ignored or it's being sucked into something else. I think that's been my biggest frustration, to be like, where is the social? Where is race? Where is gender? You know, where is socioeconomic status and ability and sexuality? Where are these things, right? Because if we're operating on the premise that we're showing up as humans, right? I'm a human, you're a human. The experiment is, how do we be human with one another? I mean, that is just insufficient. That's not how people don't always feel human, right? Part of oppression is constant dehumanization. So to even get at a point where you feel human, you know, that's another whole project. That's another whole struggle. So I think that's something that I've been struggling with the most.
I like the way you put it. Yeah, people don't always, and don't necessarily feel human. Yeah. Frustration and I know. We will. I hope we will meet soon after this interview, and we could go on and discuss and share experiences and so on. Well, in terms of your training, so it's 2 years to go, if I'm right, or yes? And yes, and are you, I mean, are you attracted to Gestalt theory? You would like to somehow, or maybe you are already doing it, somehow combine it with sociology and sociological understanding, and I wonder, and
I mean, it's such a good question, and it's something that I'm definitely working on. I think Gestalt, and again, I mean, this is how I feel in this moment, right? Like, this might change, but in this moment, I still feel, I do feel that there are concepts and theories within Gestalt that I find to be useful and promising, and that have had an impact on me in my life, and in which I feel will be quite useful with working with clients. So I still do see myself as rooted in a Gestalt approach. I think for me, in order to use it fully in a way that is responsive and supportive of me and my client, that's the work I'm doing, right? Of like, what else do I need to bring in? What else do I have to try out? You know, absolutely my therapy will have to be anti-oppressive. There's no other way I can do therapy. But what does that mean, right? Like, what is that? How do I bring that in? How do I interweave, I guess, social justice, a social justice framework.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that these projects are necessarily contradictory, right? And what I've been trying to think about and think through is, in the most simplest terms, when I sit across from my client, I want to support my client. I am there to support my client, right? But my client is not only suffering because of their interpersonal issues, right? And their kind of, their inner stuff. And as well as not, just with their family and whoever else, but they're impacted by a society. And we live, like I said, in an extremely problematic society, right? We don't live in a healthy society. So all of these things are impacting my client. So my question is, what is my responsibility? What is my ethical responsibility in treating my client? Do I, the way that I see it is it part of my ethical responsibility to address all of these other factors in the world, And how do I do that? Do I integrate them, or do I, on the side and in my everyday life, do I dedicate time towards activism and fighting for social change and social justice, right? Like, what do I do? Because if I have a client and she is talking to me about racism, yes, I think I can work with them. Absolutely. And I'm learning how, and that's part of, my journey in this moment, working with racial trauma. But then do I do nothing else outside of the therapy office? Because we both know racism is going to continue. So where does my ethical responsibility, stretch out to? Like, is it just in the office, or is it beyond that? So these are the questions that I'm thinking about in terms of how do I bring sociology, or how do I marry sociology with Gestalt therapy?
As I hear it, also your research findings, how that could be helpful also in some ways. I mean, around this, for instance, this the racist trauma or race trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
But
a lot, and so interesting, and and yet we are close to an end. I assure you. Do you feel part of a Gestalt community? Yeah, as a trainee, no matter. Do you feel there is some Gestalt community? Or you are searching for the one like this, for one like this? Or?
I mean, I would say both. I absolutely have very strong ties of support with people in my training group who are radical and, anti-oppressive and social justice oriented. So I feel very, very grateful to have found these people who support me, who give me a lot of support and really have helped me survive. And so on the one hand, I have them, and on the other hand, our training program isn't going to last forever, right? Like, we have 2 more years, and my question is, well, then what do we do? How do we find one another? How can we be in community? Can we sustain ourselves outside of, like a training program? Because I'm going to need a lot of support. I think we all need a lot of support in how to support others, right? And so I think I mentioned this briefly before, but the project that I'm working on, part of the reason why I'm doing it is so I can prepare myself for this community, right? So I'm interviewing therapists, racialized therapists, to say, what has your experience been like You know, what does it feel like to be a racialized therapist? What are the struggles, right? What comes of it? What does it mean to work with racial trauma? Do you feel equipped? You know, have you had enough training to work with racial trauma? What do you need? What kind of resources do you need? And then on the client side, we're talking to clients, racialized clients, to see, do you feel comfortable talking to your therapist about race? Have you experienced racial trauma? How does that affect you? You know, how does race affect your life? How does it affect your mental health? And I'm really hoping that we can fill some of these gaps that are missing. You know? Because I do feel that there are things that are missing that would really help me as a racialized therapist and in best supporting my client, whether they are racialized or not. You know? And so, yeah, I guess for me, it's about, you know, doing a lot of this work myself and finding a community of people who are interested in this and want to be part of it across groups, you know?
And I imagine also that those therapists you are interviewing, I mean, maybe I'm saying this wrong, but generally, this work is really lonely. I mean, not lonely, lonesome or whatever. That people are, yes, to themselves only, left to themselves, or so. It is, I mean, you are interviewing them separately, but maybe even by doing this, you can already, not only for yourself, but create this net, or you are already doing this.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think lonely is the right word. A lot of people who we're talking to feel like, here I am, I'm doing this thing on my own, but are other people talking about this? Are there groups? And so really one thing that we're hoping to, will be an outcome from this project is to create these groups, to create this community that we can all be a part of, where we can support one another and where we don't feel so alone, you
know? So that could be a nice end, that not to be alone. Are you okay? Can we end now? Are you feeling good?
Thank you so much, Camilla.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aliya. So I will send you a video, and I hope to see you soon. This Sunday, is it? Are you coming this Sunday or not?
I'm going to try to come. Sunday is quite busy for me, so I will try. But if not, John was saying that maybe we can organize another Zoom call with you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, hopefully, looking forward.
Me too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks again. Bye.